The purpose of this video is to give you an overview of Chapter 1 of Northhouse's book, Leadership, Theory, and Practice, the 8th edition. This video is not going to replace the textbook, but it'll give you an overview so that you can situate yourself in it and better understand the textbook when you read it. The main idea in this chapter is that we can define leadership, and the way that we define leadership will influence how we interpret it. So the leadership that Northouse provides, which I thoroughly agree with, is that leadership is a process whereby an individual influences a group of individuals to achieve a common goal. Now, there's a number of key ideas here. One is that it's a process. Leadership isn't just some set of characteristics of an individual. Rather, it's a series of interactions between a leader and the followers. And in this process, the individual who is the leader influences a group of individuals. So that's the key verb that describes what happens in leadership, is influences, has some type of impact on people. And this group of individuals, who are sometimes called followers, but that's not necessarily a good term because they might not see themselves as followers, but they're a group of individuals who are influenced to some degree to achieve a common goal, to accomplish something together. So that's what leadership is this idea of influencing other people to achieve a common goal. Now, one of the key things to understand is that leadership is often viewed as a series of traits versus a process. And so these next two slides distinguish the trait concept of leadership, which is kind of a traditional way of looking at it, with a process, and we compare it with the process approach to leadership, which is a much more accurate way describing of how people influence each other. So in this trait definition of leadership, there are certain individuals, and those are the leaders, and they have special innate or inborn characteristics or qualities that differentiate them from non-leaders. So there's the idea that some people are leaders, some people are not leaders, and it depends on what their characteristics are. And these are called traits. And so we can say that leadership resides in select individuals, select people. That means some people have the traits necessary to be leaders, but others don't. And leadership is restricted to a small number of people, those with inborn talent. And so this picture here kind of shows some of the traits and characteristics that are associated with leadership, such as height, intelligence, extroversion, verbal fluency, and there's a bunch of other traits that we tend to associate with leaders. And in the trait definition, the trait approach to leadership, the leadership consists of having these characteristics, these traits, and that's what influences followers. Now we'll see in later chapters that traits are important, but that doesn't capture the whole picture. Leadership really is more of a process, an interaction between the leader and followers. And so we'll be using in this book the process approach to leadership. And so in the process approach, leadership is a phenomena that occurs in the interactions between the leaders and the followers. So you've got leaders and followers interacting, and if the leader does the right things and the followers have the right characteristics and respond the same way that's appropriate, we can say that leadership is occurring. And so leadership is something that's observed or something that's done, and it also means that leadership can be learned. It's not something necessarily innate, though certainly some innate characteristics will help people be leaders more effectively than those who don't have those traits. So we're going to focus throughout this book on this leadership process. We always need to think of it as a process of this interaction. That's why we have these arrows going the two ways here. So that leaders are influencing followers, and followers influence good leaders so that they adapt their behavior to the situation. Now, there's a couple concepts that are important to understand about leadership, a couple distinctions, and the first one is the idea of there's assigned leadership and emergent leadership. Assigned leadership is leadership that's based on a position within an organization. People are assigned a position by somebody who has some other type of authority, and this could be something like a team leader, a plant manager, a department head, a director, a CEO, somebody that's assigned some type of a position. Now, in contrast, there's leadership and leaders that emerge, that come up from among other people without necessarily being assigned a position of power. So emergent leadership is leadership perceived by others regardless of the other people's titles. So it emerges over time through interactions with others. And we've studied emergent leadership quite a bit because those are the type of leaders that you want, who emerge, who naturally have an influence over people because of their behaviors. And some of the behaviors that we can observe in emergent leaders are verbal engagement with people. They communicate, they connect with people. They gather and provide information to other people. They gather information, they know where to look to find the information that's needed to solve and work on problems, and then they also share and provide the information with other people as necessary, and this makes them extremely valuable to other people. They also seek other people's opinions because they know that their point of view is limited. They get other people's opinions, which increases their knowledge, but it also makes them more valuable to other people because other people feel valued by them. They're firm but not rigid. They focus on what they believe is true, what they know is right, but they're not rigid in that they're willing to work together with others and get new information and adapt to their point of views. Another trait that we'll see is extremely important is professional competence. They know how to do the job. They know how to solve the problems. They know how to get things done. And finally, another trait is interpersonal warmth. They're people that you like being with. They're warm and friendly. They come across as caring, as non-threatening. And when people have these traits, that makes them more likely to emerge in a natural way as leaders without necessarily being assigned a position of leadership. So we're going to put a big emphasis on that. And as you'll see throughout the textbook, that these traits interact with a person's personality and gender, and so not everybody needs to be the exact same way, but it depends on a lot of things, including the circumstance that someone is in. Another key concept associated with leadership, this influence process between leaders and followers, is the idea of power. And because power, in this sense, can be defined as the capacity to influence. Some people have a large capacity to influence other people have less of a capacity to influence people. This ability to change others' beliefs, attitudes, and actions. And so that's essentially what leaders want to be doing, is to change others' beliefs, attitudes, and actions in order to accomplish a common goal. Now, an excellent understanding of power in organizations, power in social relationships, powers describing how a leader, whether an assigned or an emergent leader, interacts with people, are the 5 categories presented by French and Raven, known as referent, expert, legitimate, reward, and coercive. Let's look at these 5 bases, these 5 ways of exerting power. So this is table 1 from your textbook there. The first one is referent power, and that's based on this idea that people like certain other people, they want to be like other people, they want to be close to other people, and if you're one of those people, you have what's known as referent power. Sometimes this is called relationship power also. It doesn't come from being assigned to some position, it doesn't come from being an expert or having a dominant personality. It comes from the fact that people like you and they want to be close to you, they want to please you, and they'll allow themselves to be influenced by you. An example of that would be a teacher who's adored by students. Movie stars have referent powers. Friendly and caring people have a referent power. And that's one of the distinctions sometimes between a manager and a leader is someone who's viewed as caring about people and leading them not just in a common direction, but in a direction that's beneficial for them personally. A second basis of power is what's known as expert power. And this is based on people's perceptions that the leader is competent. The leader knows what he or she is doing. And if we've got somebody that we see as being an expert, someone that we know is not going to lead us in the wrong direction, we're going to allow them to influence that. A simple example is a tour guide who's knowledgeable about some place, some foreign country, some museum, is considered to have expert power, and when we're on a tour with him or her, we will listen to the tour guide. At work, there are people that really know how the system works, or they know how to do a certain task extremely well. Those people have expert power, and they can influence people for good or for bad, hopefully for good. So those are the first 2 types of power. The reference power, that's being friendly. The expert power is knowing how to do things. Now, then we've got 3 categories of other types of power. The first is legitimate power, and that's kind of like the assigned leadership. It's associated with having status or formal job authority because because of the position that you have. A judge in the courtroom, everybody knows that you're supposed to listen to and obey the judge in the courtroom, and that's who directs the courtroom. That's legitimate power. When you start a job, you are assigned a supervisor, and your supervisor has legitimate authority to tell you what to do, and everybody knows that. Even if it doesn't say on your contract you must obey your supervisor, you know that that's what you're supposed to do. So that's called legitimate power because it comes from our cultural understanding of what somebody in authority is supposed to do. Now, some other types of power, and sometimes these are the only types of power that people have, is a reward power, and that's the ability to do good to somebody, like pay somebody. And that's why most people end up working someplace, is because they're going to be paid to do their job, and that's because somebody has a power to reward people. The ability to promote somebody, the ability to give good job assignments. Those are all examples of reward power. And so a supervisor who gives rewards to employees who work hard is using reward power. The other side of reward power is coercive power, or the power to punish. It's derived from having the capacity, the ability to penalize or punish others. A coach who sits players on the bench, who doesn't let them play in the game for being late to practice, is using coercive power. Or a supervisor who will give bad working hours to someone who's lazy or who performs poorly is using coercive power. Everybody likes reward power better than coercive power. So putting these different types of power into perspective, we've got one category of position power, which is essentially assigned power. People with power have told other people that they can have these types of powers. That's derived from a rank in an organization, and typically position power includes legitimate power. That's the fact that everybody recognizes who the supervisor is. Reward power, the good things that the supervisor can do to an employee, or the coercive power, the bad things a supervisor can do to an employee to get the employee to do what he or she wants them to. But then there's also, in contrast to position power, is personal power, which is what is the source of emergent leadership. Personal power is influence derived from being seen as likable and competent. So that would be referent power, that's being likable, and the expert power is being competent. Now this distinction between personal power and positional power is huge. Often it makes a difference between what a good leader is and what a bad leader is. Or sometimes we can say if you just have positional power, you're a manager, but if you have personal power, you're a leader. And this personal power is what causes the biggest changes, not only in organizations, but in other people's lives and in society as a whole. So this is a really important distinction that we'll see throughout the entire book, that this emergent leadership, this personal power, is what we need to work on, developing in our lives so that we can have the greatest positive influence on the organization that we're with, but also the people that we're working with, the people under our authority and the people above us, so that we can get them to all work together towards common goals that are beneficial. Now, I teach at Azusa Pacific University, which is a Christian university in California, and one of the things that we do is we like to look at how the course content relates to biblical content. And there's an important verse in the Bible that's written in the New Testament, written by James, the brother of Jesus, and he said to a group of people trying to follow Christ, "My brothers and sisters, not many of you should become leaders or teachers," as it's traditionally translated, but leaders is a good translation too, especially in this context, "because you know that we will be judged more strictly." When we're in a position of leadership, either assigned or emergent, either because of the authority that's been given to us or because of our ability to influence people, because of our relationships or our abilities, we're accountable for how we influence people. We can influence them for good, we can influence them for bad. We can influence them for selfish reasons, or we can influence them to do good for others. And if we're a Christian, if we're someone who wants to follow Jesus and do what pleases God, we need to realize that if we have power, we are accountable for it, and we will be judged more strictly if we misuse it, emphasizing our need to use all the power we have for the good of others.